Hello, and welcome to yet another unbiased gear review. Today we are taking a look at a Haze 6 WHT. So first, let's go over the specifications of this instrument. We have a somewhat thick poplar body, 44 millimeters, with a bolt-on maple neck and a bound rosewood fingerboard with 24 frets. 6 rotomatic tuners, a new bone nut is what they call it. We have a multiscale design that's it's paltry, but it's a multiscale nonetheless, 25 to 25.5 inches. We have an individual saddle bridge here, as well as KD20 active humbuckers. So I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Arnold, I've never even heard of Haze guitars. Well, truthfully, up until recently, neither had I. If you're anything like me, you've probably got some saved eBay searches that just kind of show up with some interesting stuff in your feed every so often. And for me, one of those saved searches is fan frets. Now, this sucker came up and it was dirt cheap. Like, look up Haze right now, and most of them are roughly $300, $350, give or take in either direction. The price fluctuates very, very frequently. But, needless to say, it is a cheapy instrument, made in China. It looks like the company is based out of Australia. So if you're looking for custom shop quality, it is not here. But, something so super dirt cheap, is it worth owning? Something that's made in China, is it worth owning? Let's take a look at some of the appointments that we've got on here. There are a few things that I don't really care for on this instrument. For starters, the multiscale fan fret design. Can you really call it a fan fret if the difference is only 1/2 of an inch? This is such a minuscule, minute fan fret design. I really think a little bit more of R&D could have gone into this. What do people want from a fan fret design? They want something a little bit more extreme than 1/2 of an inch. They want to actually see if it improves any aspect of their playing. And at a 1/2 inch difference, I really can't see anyone making any sort of conclusion based upon that. So what I would have recommended, hey, you're building this thing, maybe put in an extra inch into that fan. How about 25 to 26.5? How about 25.5 to 27? Something like that, so that people that are buying this cheap thing can really formulate an opinion on that fan fret design. But anyways, moving on. Some other things that I don't necessarily care for, if you look at the neck joint here. Now, it's really, really cool how they still added a bit of a contour here, but it's a straight up 90-degree angle. Flat along here, flat along here. Even Fender, even when they do a contoured neck heel, still has a little bit of a beveled edge right here. Ibanez is, of course, kind of the gold standard at this point for an all-access neck contour on a bolt-on neck. This could have just been done a little bit differently. I think everyone would have appreciated it a little bit more. That being said, am I really going to call out a whole bunch of stuff on a $300 to $350 instrument? Not so much. Kind of the same goes for right here. We've got a nice little gap between the neck and the body in the joint there. Now, I'm sure some of you have seen videos on like Instagram or on Facebook of a custom shop luthier who puts the body on the neck and doesn't even bolt it on and just kind of gives it a little wiggle, or maybe something like this just to make sure that the thing isn't falling off, there's several reasons why that is important. Because number one, it speaks to the stability of the instrument to know that, oh wow, that whole measure twice, cut once thing is really taken seriously. We got a nice snug fit in there. This builder takes themselves seriously. The other reason why is because, hey, when it's nice and snug in there, the bolt-on design is not necessarily designed to give you optimum sustain, so maybe with a little bit more contact between the neck and the body, you get just a smidgen more. So there's that. Now, moving on to some things that I really do like about this guitar. Despite the fact that the fan is minuscule, the fact remains this is a fanned fret instrument. Granted, the perpendicular fret is the nut, whatever. Doesn't really lend itself to the full fan fret experience, but the concept is cool. A fan fret instrument for less than $500, that is not a bad thing to be pursuing. I say, cool, let's put out some more starter instruments so people who are curious about this concept can try them. The fret work is not the greatest in the world, but would I say that it's definitely better than some of the other super cheapy stuff that's out there? Stuff like maybe Cort or Squier or Epiphone? Yeah. To a certain extent, I think that this is a little bit nicer fretwork. The edges are nice. They sometimes they look a little haggard, but they seem pretty solid. The fact that there's binding on the fretboard also is a nice touch, because even if the fretwork isn't so solid on the sides, you can't really feel it while you're playing. Why? Because it's got that bound edge on that board to help hide any sort of like tangs poking out at you from the fret edges. So that's cool. That's a nice touch. Something else I want to call out is the major contact points for the strings here. First of all, let's go over the nut. This nut was one of those kind of surprising things that both Chad and I, when he sat down and played this, we both kind of called out like, is that a bone nut? Did a little bit of research into it. The answer is no, this is not a bone nut, but it is a synthetic material that is meant to be as close to bone as possible. So it's actually a pretty nice nut. Does it lend itself so much to tuning stability? I can't really say so. That being said, after this thing settled, it was a pretty stable instrument as far as tuning goes. But I digress. The bridge, the other contact point for the strings, this is a really nice individual saddle bridge. Just kind of eyeballing it, first of all, it looks like there's not really any sort of like spatial difference between the strings. If I had a set of calipers here, I would actually measure that to give you a definitive answer on that. But just kind of eyeballing it, it looks like everything is pretty dead on, which, I'll take that for what it is. But what I really love about this individual saddle bridge is that here we have a cheap instrument with a very nice low profile individual saddle bridge. Typically on instruments in this price point, you see stuff like you typically find on the Jackson fan fret models or the Agile fan fret models, where it looks like it's just a cheap piece of metal with a screw and a saddle, and that's really frickin' it. Whereas this, it's almost like there's like a nice little housing for each saddle in there to kind of reduce any sort of like space in between the different contact surfaces. That's pretty cool. That's a pretty interesting design, and truthfully, I wish more guitars that use individual saddle bridges had this design. I really like this. Now, oh shoot, I forgot to call out something when I was mentioning stuff I didn't really care for. This is just an easy fix. A lot of you guys have called it out that, hey, it's a cheap POS Chinese-made guitar, so don't expect a whole lot. When I was changing out the strings and giving this thing a proper setup, all but one of the string ferrules fell out. There again, easy fix. I get what you guys are saying. Yeah, just put a little teeny tiny dab of wood glue on there, whack it back into place, and and behold, what could have been something detrimental is now all of a sudden solved. Cool, awesome. So now, are you ready to hear the thing about this instrument that puts this a cut above other Chinese-made pieces of shit? Oh my god, wait till you hear these pickups. Not bad at all, right? So these pickups, for being in a very cheap instrument, wow. That was the thing that really stood out to me when I first got this thing is, oh my god, these pickups sound really, really good for such a cheaply made instrument. They are active pickups. I did kind of open this thing up. We've got the battery housing in here, took the pickups out, and they actually have kind of like a cheap equivalent of like the EMG Quick Connect system. They're not bad at all. There's kind of too much tonal similarity between the neck and bridge pickup, so then when you switch back and forth, you don't really hear a whole lot of difference in this. All the difference pretty much comes from just the placement. It's honestly like if you were to put in a set of twin EMG 81s. There's not really a whole lot of difference between those two. Now, that being said though, these things have some decent output. They could be a little bit clearer, but the tone is really, really good. It's very similar to like remember when Seymour Duncan originally came out with their Livewire Classics? It's very reminiscent of those, in my honest opinion. A little bit similar also to the newer sets of like EMG 5766. Not quite as much oomph, not quite as much clarity, but it's similar. It's getting there. Here's my point. Why is it that so many guitar companies, when they're putting out their cheaper instruments, whether it be ESP, Cort, Ibanez, Epiphone, Fender, all these brands, Jackson, even Schecter to a certain extent, they keep putting in these cheap refrigerator magnet pickups in there? I can't understand it, and I call them refrigerator magnet pickups because that's the only thing that they're good for, is throwing them on your fridge to keep a note up there. These things actually sound really, really good in a guitar that costs $300 to $350, give or take. I'm sorry, that kind of makes it a little unacceptable for us to be getting and accepting crap from a lot of other companies. These things sound really, really good in a no-name guitar. So now, my final thoughts on the instrument. Honestly, I went into this expecting a hunk of junk. I went into this saying, all right, I'm just going to throw a few $100s out there, get my piece of junk, and whatever, it's going to be good fodder for a review video. We'll slam it, I'll sell it and get rid of it, and then that'll be it. Honestly, this thing turned out to be pretty good. The playability is actually there. Like, if you were to give me a choice between this and a similarly price-pointed Jackson, like one of the JS models, I would pick this for sure. If you were to give me a choice between this and a Squier, I would pick this for sure. This is a pretty solid instrument. I was very, very pleasantly surprised. You know, there's a few nice touches like I pointed out earlier. If anything, this could even be a great backup instrument or even a primary stage instrument if you did a little bit of modding to it. This could be a great piece if you just modded a few things. I like the nut. The nut's pretty cool. I think it would do a little bit better with an actual Graphtec nut in here. Also one that fits properly. That's one of the few things that didn't really work out so well when they measured the nut. It kind of sticks out on this side. The fretboard sticks out on this side. It just doesn't line up perfectly. Get a nice Graphtec nut, the correct measurements, the correct slotting. Throw that thing in here. I think you'll have a lot better tuning stability. Also, I think if you were to put on like a set of locking hipshot tuners onto this thing, I think this could be an extremely stage-worthy instrument. I'm not one to give a lot of high-quality recommendations on this channel. Usually, you know me, I like calling out a lot of bullshit. I love calling out instruments that are hunks of junk. This one I expected it to be, and it very much surprised me. Yeah, it's a great instrument, especially for the money. So it's that time again in the review. Arnold, what are you drinking today? Well, from UNBIASED, or however you pronounce it, I am having their framboise. You have no idea how long I've been mispronouncing that as framboise. Thanks, honey. But it's pronounced framboise. This is an American raspberry wild ale, meaning that it is going to be sour. I say going to be like I haven't had any already. It's actually really, really nice. It pours a nice peach color, a little bit of carbonation there, a very, very white head. Keeping with that peach theme, it has some very peachy aromas to it, and the taste is a nice peach-infused raspberry sour. It's kind of funny, they call out all the raspberry, but there's a lot of peach notes in this. It's very, very tasty. It's not my favorite sour that I've ever had, but damn is it good. It's a very solid sour. If I was rating this on Untappd, give it a 3.75. I would highly recommend checking this out if you're into sour beers. But, yeah, very, very tasty. So thank you so much for tuning in to this gear review. There will be many more reviews coming, so please like and subscribe and leave a comment in the comment section below. And yeah, here's to the next video. Cheers.